Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for what's going to be our second episode. Today, we're in Sao Paulo. We're at the SME Finance Forum. And today, I'm really happy to have someone who has not only a great amount of experience in SMEs and 26 years doing it, but also someone I call a friend and a professional acquaintance. In addition to that, Jay Singer. Jay, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jan.
Good to see you.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So Jan, I've been actually in the payments ecosystem for a bit more than 30 years. I started my career at American Express. I'm really focusing on delivering value, creating card products, managing co-brand relationships with big players, and putting those cards out there, vis-a-vis acquisition channels, managing acquisition channels, so direct mail and at the time, telephone calls and digital marketing, you name it. I moved over to MasterCard because I had a great opportunity to join a group that was focusing on doing what we call consulting back in the day. It was called a marketing consulting organization. Later was called MasterCard Advisors, and today is the MasterCard Services business. And that was an incredible experience. We worked with financial institutions to sort of test in and gain share of business, to win share of business, and eventually to earn revenue, because we're helping the banks acquire customers and optimizing their portfolios. Expanded that business to work on new products, and eventually I was asked to go help start that business in Asia. And it was a great experience. Spent 4 years living in Hong Kong and working throughout the region with banks in helping them optimize their business, their payments business. I later came back from from overseas to the United States, and I moved into a role that was focusing on managing the global relationship with one of our biggest partners, Citibank. And in that capacity, really what I got to understand is, how did a bank view the solutions and products in the payment space, and how are they making money, and what did they expect of their partners? I spent a good 7 or 8 years, meeting that relationship and supporting that relationship from a sales perspective and account perspective. And then I moved into the world of product, and product was great. I focused on the commercial payment space.
Yeah.
I started first in a regional capacity, leading commercial payments in North America for MasterCard. And that meant I was managing and developing solutions for commercial clients, for small businesses, for government, and a team that went out and did all of that stuff and helped sell that into those entities. Great experience, great exposure, and quite frankly, a lot of fun. I then moved into a bit more of a strategic role in leading the small business segment globally. First, set up in that capacity on a global stage. And in those capacities, sort of saw, help develop the overall segment strategy, the product strategy, manage the existing sets of products, and develop new sets of products. And throughout that, I had a lot of experience and opportunity to work all over the world and work with banks and FIs and other players in the ecosystem, as well as SMEs all over the world. About a year ago, I sort of hung up my MasterCard threads and retired from MasterCard and really said, I want to focus on the things that I really enjoy. And it gets back into focusing on how I can help engage financial institutions, work with fintechs to create solutions for the SME. And certainly working with the likes of KoreFusion as an expert advisor, helps provide me that opportunity to share my experiences and still learn and, work together with you guys to deliver against the needs of your clients.
No, well, definitely. We benefit from your wisdom. So thanks for joining the team. And I think it's also important for us to help the audience understand the importance of SMEs, right? I mean, you know the figures in some ways better than I, but what is 150 million formal SMEs, and then what do we have after that?
350 to 400 million informal SMEs, globally. And those are rough estimates, but every group has tried to do this, sizing it. It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah,
it's an opportunity to bring those informal businesses into the formal economy. It has created lots of competition and trying to deliver those values.
Some of the research that we had done in Brazil now 18 months ago was showing that somewhere between 50 and 60% of SMEs were not happy with the financial products offered by their bank. And mostly that's an incumbent bank. And at the same time, now somewhere around 25% of them are open to open banking type of solutions, right, and saying, if you were not a bank, I would be open to entertaining some types of payment or lending product from you. And I think that really changes how we need to think about who is a bank and who is the entity of trust that we should be thinking of, that which is best positioned for an SME to turn to for financial services. And that's a lot, I think, of what you've been looking at.
Those are things that I've seen, and have those opinions have sort of been formulated over the years, really looking at this. I mean, SMEs really, that individual business owner, and we'll talk about small businesses for a moment, is really looking for a trusted advisor, right? That notion of trust. And where do they get that relationship from? Where can they find that? Yes, family and friends, obviously, first. Sometimes their communities. But when it comes to financial services, well, you would think normally the bank. But that bank relationship has been fraught, as you pointed out, with services that don't necessarily meet their needs. Right. And I think that's been the challenge. And they want their banks to meet their needs, and they want them to deliver it. And I think some banks have, and, we'll talk a little bit about those who have and the benefits they reap from it, but many of them have not. And I think that leaves room, as you mentioned, for others to come in.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leaves a big question on the table then as to why banks, despite such a large SME opportunity, both in terms of the economy and the potential that they have financially, but just in sheer numbers, have struggled or given lip service even perhaps to the segment for so long.
Yeah, and I used to struggle with this quite a bit, and spent a lot of time trying to create and tell a story about value of what the SME segment, brings to a bank. But, I think the real reason is structurally. We have commercial banks that target large enterprises principally, and they can create very focused customized commercial solutions for that. They can put resources against it. Why? Because that one customer can produce a lot of revenue. There's a scale equation there. Where on the consumer side, the retail side of the bank, there's an opportunity to go after consumers. And consumers, they'll be broken into a couple of different segments. You might have a couple different consumer solutions that you're offering. There's many solutions for consumers and many consumers out there.
Right.
And so what happens is then, again, another scale opportunity where I can automate and put a handful of solutions out and cover a mass. As we were sort of alluding to with small businesses, however, we got a very fragmented group. They need customized solutions by each vertical, perhaps, or at least customized delivery by each vertical. And what this causes is a high cost of serve. The high cost of service is sort of that inhibitor that prevents banks from really thinking about the SME in the same way. And to your point, what they often do is serve them up with consumer solutions. Hey, you're a consumer. That small business owner is a consumer as well. Yeah, that solution should be good enough for you. It's really not delivering on the needs they have. And the commercial solutions that are sitting in the commercial bank are generally way too complex and not easy to use for that audience. So we got this dilemma. The banks are looking at this segment and saying, high cost of service, requires a lot of work. Yeah, the potential's there, but I've got these two other populations that just seem to be, we're able to deliver value against them.
And I think kind of entering stage left and right, you have the neobanks and the digital banks, which definitely are lighter and more agile and have less of a cost burden so that they can move more agilely. But I'm wondering if they're even really adequately placed to address that vertical need that you were talking about. And then it's like switching the narrative on the other side of the stage and looking at who the SMEs are already working with, and are they going to become the embedded finance provider, maybe even becoming a bank themselves? I think that's an interesting.
I agree, and I think that's sort of what's playing out a little bit here, right? We have a number of neo and digital banks that are targeting not just consumers but SMEs, because this, once again, it goes back to that law of, you go where there's an opportunity. Well, we have an underserved segment, as we've alluded to here. Let's try to produce a product and a value proposition that meets that segment. The challenge is trust, and I think going back to that notion of trusted advisor. That digital bank may not have the reputation from a brand or an awareness perspective, and it becomes very difficult to acquire and drive those customers. Now, there are some examples of digital banks that have done a good job of acquiring customers.
Right.
Revolut, Brex in the United States, and Nubank here.
Right.
There are some examples of these digital banks that have acquired customers. But we have to remind them that they still need to have the ability to customize that solution.
You mentioned trust. I think it almost, maybe deliberately or not, but it explains why there's a first stage for these neo and digital banks of going after consumers, right? It's where you establish your trust. And now that you know us, we can move into the other areas. We haven't really seen that many large successful banks that begin with an SME offering and stay there.
I think it's a real challenge, and even the likes of Brex as an example, what we've seen is they're moving a little bit more upmarket. Again, that challenge of delivering to the end small business owner, the fragmentation that exists there makes it a little challenging.
Yeah.
To differentiate and to talk to them and with their needs.
And then that leaves us then with who these SMEs have been trusting and doing business for ages, and are they becoming a bank or a provider of service?
And this is an area that we thought long and hard of. But certainly when I was at MasterCard, right? You have the traditional banks who you think are traditionally MasterCard's customers, to do business with. But the idea of diversifying and changing the channel and looking at distribution in a different light, the need to say, who else is somebody that deals with SMEs? It could be supplier groups, it could be payment, processors, it could be software companies like accounting software or mini ERP solutions. It could be marketplaces where they're buying and selling goods.
Yes.
All of these represent, a place where the SME is already doing business and there's a relationship there. I didn't include technology firms, ISVs and other providers of software for their particular vertical. So again, there are players out there that the SMEs already established relationships with.
Yep.
And now can you enable them to extend their service offering to include payments?
Something we're both coming back to, I don't know if we're mutually reassuring ourselves in the chamber here, is either directly or shining by absence is a need for critical mass. Critical mass either serving as a conduit to creating trust. Mm-hmm. Critical mass being something that is lost to competition, which is growing, or critical mass giving you either a ceiling that you want to break through now into something else because new consumer groups, or enough momentum, as you were mentioning with Chase in the United States, among SMBs to say you're a juggernaut in this space. So it seems to be we're coming in one way or another back to you need to have sufficient size and momentum here, that to break through into this as a new player is going to be challenging.
For me, it's a bit of an observation over the years that, when we think about payments and we think about those relationships, I think what we've seen is the bigger banks dominate. Mm-hmm. And why do they dominate? Because they are putting more resources and focus against it. You ask a small business, however, who would they rather have their business banking with? As an example, it's going to be that community bank or community institution closer to where they operate. But that institution today, has historically been challenged with operating in that segment to provide the full suite of solutions that everybody needs. May provide some basic solutions. That small business owner will likely have a relationship with that entity, but not getting their full set of needs addressed.
That would open the door to thinking of, an API platform type of model where as a big guy, you can't be everything. And as a small guy, you can't reach everybody. So there's a co-opetition.
I see a lot of fintechs today playing in what I call the infrastructure space.
Mm-hmm.
How do we enable these second, third, fourth tier banks to play at a level of the big guy, at a level of offering innovation and capability sets to their customers? And I really do see that. And there needs to be an awareness and a willingness by that next tier down of bank to look at that segment and say, we need something there. And I listen, I've had many conversations over the years that there is a need. Those solutions need to be simple. You mentioned API. A lot of these businesses may not have the ability to consume APIs.
Right.
So that's a challenge. They need to be simple. They need to be easily deployed. White labelable, I call that, I don't know if that's a word, but being able to be white labeled, maybe templated. So you're buying an off-the-shelf solution.
Yep.
I used to call this the idea of SME in a box, right? And a good mutual friend that used to use that term all the time. Give Paulo Fernandez a shout.
Exactly.
But this idea of, SME in a box is enable that distributor to be able to handle payments, handle loans, handle payments in the card scenario, and acceptance of those payments, and bring it all together into a simple, easy plugin.
This is interesting because,
and by the way, this is an idea that's been out there for years. Yeah, it's not novel. It's not novel and new.
It makes me think of some work we were doing in the States now 3-4 years ago. I guess this was during the pandemic, where the bigger banks had the resources, the middle banks were suffering, and the smaller banks, who are the community banks, were small enough that the off-the-box solution for their core works. It got them up, and they had that community trust, so they were able to hold on to that into their community relationship.
I think that's a secret, and I think we're referring to the U.S. a bit, but candidly, when I look around the world and look at bank structures in different markets around the world, there's generally one or maybe 2 or 3 really big players in those markets, and there's a lot of smaller players. They could be financing organizations or whomever, local community organizations. It's those community organizations that we're talking about here. I really think that extends beyond the U.S., quite candidly.
And that brings us then to the other players, which are these marketplaces or even distributors, brick and mortar distributors who have moved into the online space, or maybe even a super app. I had mentioned Grab earlier, as building the financial muscle, either directly or through a banking as a service model. And they've got trust, and they've got reach, and they are juggernauts in and of themselves.
And I think you're going to see more and more of this play out. And I've talked to marketplaces over the years, particularly in developing market, who realize their faith is building that network ecosystem with these players, and then selling other products in the future to that ecosystem as their means of success.
Yeah.
It's not the buying and selling on the marketplace that's success. That's the enabler. It's the cross-selling and distribution of other products and services like financial services. That is where they see their revenue coming from. We've seen certainly a lot of examples here in Brazil and we talked about Pago earlier as an example of a marketplace that has built or acquired capabilities to offer their own. And I think that's a great example out there of a really big sort of community marketplace.
And if we talk a little bit about Brazil and the States, but in your experience, geography might play a role also as to who these types of players would be. I know in past work in Latin America, the bottle distributors have great distribution. Then it might be the same thing in Africa or in Asia. What are the nuances or the flavors that you feel?
Yeah, I think it does vary. That's a really good point, Jan. We've done some work, and I've done some work specifically in Africa, working through how to get access to finance to SMEs. Well, if you think about it, it's those distributor organizations that are distributing goods to these micro businesses and saying, how do you offer financial services to them through your channels, right? Because you have that established relationship. You have that trust. You have that need established. And by the way, by offering those financial solutions, you should be able to sell more of your product right to that SME. You're enabling them to consume and buy more, to sell more. And I think that is really a win-win for the ecosystem. So I do see, the bigger consumer goods companies, the CPGs really sort of creating a real opportunity as well. And this goes back to the story that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There's a lot of green space out there because, for sure, as we said, 350 to 400 million of these SMEs that are out there are informal. They're not being served. And there is this tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, they're not being served by financial service players, at least directly.
No, they're being served by their communities, their family, or their size and scale of their business is just limited because of their capacity to have services.
Or as you mentioned with consumer goods companies, they're being given a line of credit de facto by saying you have 15 days or a week to pay. And these companies already have a rich database of the informal companies. So it sounds like they have a lot to play on here.
Yeah. And you find that definitely, it's everywhere in the world, but certainly when you think about the vast majority of these informal SMEs, they're existing in the more traditional developing markets, right? So throughout Africa, parts of Asia, certainly in parts of Latin America as well, the numbers are quite significant. Even in Eastern Europe as well. I don't want to lose sight of those opportunities. These are, merging economies with an emerging, small business customer set. That's actually, in many ways, where these governments are looking to formalize. Because formalization provides basis for tax, it provides basis for financial health and the economy of these countries as well.
Yeah, you bring something up which is really important of why the SMEs have remained outside of the purview of financial services. Very often it's because they don't want to be taxed.
Right.
And the owner deliberately wants to keep things in the gray zone at least. Do you think there's any carrot or stick here? And even thinking of the right channels, be it, a fintech or marketplace, what should we offer collectively to SMEs?
Well, what's interesting, and listen, I think it's a joint offering, private-public partnership to get here. And this is one of the reasons we're here
at the forum.
And this is really what the SME Finance Forum stands for, which is helping SMEs gain access to financial services and credit.
Yes.
Right? You need to have that partnership of public and private to get there. That incentivization could be from a government perspective, not only forcing and requiring, businesses to provide access to tools and solutions,
right,
but provide the SMEs with the means of, we want you to be counted. We want to give you access to these solutions. And in doing so, we're going to work with you on what it means to be formal.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard anyone say this, and this is really interesting, having regulation say, as a supplier, it was so critical to say, we're going to ask you now to offer financial services.
Yeah.
I think that's I haven't heard that one before.
Well, there are examples of that, though, if you think about it, maybe not as a supplier, but certainly a financial entity. Mm-hmm. There are banks around the world that require certain portions of, countries in certain parts of the world that require their banks or financial institutions to have a certain percentage of their loan portfolio targeting this group.
It's actually, there's a convergence of a couple of things that need, and I'm thinking, for example, Nigeria, which has been front center in terms of wanting to be more aggressive and having all of its financial institutions give more to SMEs. That one way of facilitating this, if you are a bank, is now leaning into the opportunity with these fintechs and with these marketplaces. So that's taking a regulation which is on the books and saying, here's a solution, an opportunity.
Well, when we think about, I just think back to some of the regulation that's happened over the last decade around privacy, GDPR, and then more recently around open banking. Those entities that have leaned into that, I think, will win.
Yeah.
Because they have a leg up. They have investment. They're thinking about it strategically. They're not thinking about it as a reactive punishment or compliance-related issue. And I think there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
You're right. I think it's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
Yeah.
And if you're a regulator and we're looking at these distributors come marketplaces who are becoming, either through banking as a service or directly through other fintechs, providers of credit and payment solutions, for better or for worse, you're bringing them into these regulatory suggestions or mandates of lending to SMEs, which for these players is nothing new, and it should be easy because that's who they play with every day. But it's also, I think, a way of the regulator looking at these alternative players as an opportunity and saying, don't just lean on your incumbent and usual players, facilitate and open doors to make it easier for these new types of players to play with the ecosystem that you do have.
Think about building innovation to bring solutions to the table. And I think we're seeing more and more in that around the world. Obviously, then these new players become large, and then maybe they do need a little bit more regulatory oversight and review, right? Because it then becomes a risk. And I think we're seeing that emerge. We're seeing that. We see that today with, social communication, the social, e-commerce, social communication. It's happening.
And that brings us basically full circle to where we're starting. That we started this as saying there's a real challenge, and banks, at least the incumbent ones, have not been the best of leaning into the opportunity. But as we explore what's on the table, we're seeing there's actually a lot of space for them to work and collaborate with the regulator, with fintechs, with distributors and marketplaces.
And I think that's really the opportunity going forward. The channel is emerging, so it's not just financial institutions anymore. Competition is here. There's thousands of fintech / SaaS-like solutions that are targeting the needs of SMEs today. And those who react are going to see an opportunity. Those who wait, sit back, may not just lose the opportunity, but may be challenged with their existing book of business.
Yeah, well, that's even scarier, saying you stand to lose, not just to lose out on the opportunity, but to actually lose.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's well said. And kind of finishing this, what else do you think we've maybe missed here, or any thoughts that you think are worth it?
I think as a product person, it's really starts with the SME and really starts with their needs and making sure that delivering value constantly that can address the needs of the SME. Single point solutions, I just are a bit passe. I don't think they're going to work anymore. Mm-hmm. The ability to deliver value across the challenges and needs of an SME, payments and beyond, is going to be really critical going forward. I think it's really going to force the need of the traditional players to be creative, and it's going to create an opportunity for new players to emerge. And I do see that constantly, that constant drive of the changing needs or the expectations of an SME. Experience is another one. User experience is another one. SMEs, we talked about this earlier from a banking perspective. It's got to deliver value, but it's got to be simple and easy to use. And if you're a enabler, it's got to be functionality that's simple and easy to deploy, so it can be used. These are some of the things that I think are going to, lead to success in the future. And of course, you can't go a conversation without saying, how do you leverage data? And how do you leverage today AI and new technologies that are going to enable one to produce even more value for SMEs in terms of that trusted advisor notion? Can you use data and deliver back to that SME value in terms of what you know about them in real time to help with very specific recommendations, insights around their business. But it has to be delivered in a way that it's both useful and coming from that trusted source. And so I do see that ability to do that is going to create that next frontier of innovation.
You mentioned AI. Actually, AI is front center and part of what the forum is going to be talking about these days. And as I was preparing, I looked over the notes, something came front forward in terms of what the Chinese are doing. And I know talking about China and AI is rife with many politically sensitive issues. Sure. But one of the things that really came out was saying how the Chinese banks have been harnessing AI for better credit decisioning and adaptation of products and anticipation of movements for consumers and SMEs.
Sure.
And I don't think we've seen that level of embracing AI to the same level.
I think we're getting there. I think you're going to see, and again, hopefully at the forum here this week, we're going to hear more about how AI is going to be deployed. The question is, who's using it, who's ready to use it, and will it be used? I think what we're seeing today, and it's interesting, this question has come up. I was asked this question just the other day, actually, in a separate forum. And what was really interesting to me is I think the first observation where I see AI being deployed in the payments ecosystem is around fraud control and managing risk from that perspective. The ability to say, is this truly that person that we're interacting with through a digital means? And that could be customers, that could be the SME themselves asking for services. So how do we deploy AI in sort of minimizing fraud through these channels?
It's interesting because again, political considerations aside, I think the example that I was hearing about with the Chinese banks was presupposing that fraud and identification had already been taken care of because of the ecosystem that they were in. And this allowed them now to think of beyond that. And we're still in a needing to build that trust.
Correct. Well, privacy and security are two really important things. I mean, studies over the past 4 or 5 years that go to SME, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, everything has been thrust on an SME to operate in a digital environment, to operate online, to get online. And we're seeing that globally. But that trust factor, that unknown factor of not dealing with a human being and, face to face, creates a lot of uncertainty. It also creates a lot of risk. And what we end up hearing from SMEs is sort of cyber protection and cybersecurity is one of their top issues today. So again, these solutions that can authenticate and minimize that risk from an SME, from a distributor of solutions for SMEs, through the supplier end of things, it really is an important factor. So I do see that's where a lot of the focus has been. But to your point, I do think credit decisioning, data and insights, operational management, these are places where AI can do some good.
Yeah. Well, we kind of close it up by saying we're back at, you really need to establish trust or have that trust.
Absolutely.
There is an element of critical size that either you're going to lose because your trust is being eroded or you're gaining it because your trust is there. So that goes hand in hand with reach. And really being the center of daily contact, interaction with SMEs. Yes. And that's what's going to give you visibility to adapt by vertical or by country and understand what they need.
Those seem to be great summary.
Well, thanks, Jay. Thanks for joining us. And
thanks for having me. And let's go enjoy the forum.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thanks. Take care.
Yeah.